Hey, what's up guys? Kool-Aid here. Today we're going to be doing our heavy assault loadouts video. We're going to be covering a couple basic loadouts which will be geared more towards killing infantry. One will be a short to medium range loadout and one will be a medium to longer range loadout. Then we'll be doing a couple more specialized loadouts as well that will focus on a more specific type of role on the battlefield. I'll also be giving weapon recommendations for each loadout from each faction. Some of the footage that you will see in the background won't necessarily be using the exact loadout that I'm talking about at any given time, and that's simply because I didn't have enough certs on all my different characters, but at the same time I wanted to give you a nice little weapon preview of each LMG. It's also important to remember that these are just templates for you to use, but they can be altered in certain areas to, more fit your playstyle. So the first loadout we're going to talk about is the short to medium range loadout that's going to be focused more on killing infantry. When I say short to medium range, I'm talking about anywhere from point blank out to about 30 meters. You can still pick up kills beyond that range with this loadout, but the weapons that I'll be recommending are geared more towards that range, and beyond that 30-meter point, a lot of other longer range weapons will start to outgun you. And remember, not all of the shorter range weapons are going to have that same ideal range. That 30 meters is just kind of a starting point. But we'll come back to weapons in a bit. First, I want to talk about your heavy shield, the heart and soul of the heavy assault class, the thing that makes the heavy assault class what it is. I do want to apologize up front as I don't have footage of every shield in action. I've covered this stuff before in the past, and I will lay out the basics of each shield for you guys. If you want more in-depth information, I will leave a link to an amazing video by Rel, that covers basically every single possible detail of the shields, and I'll leave that in the description. So your starting shield is the Nanite Mesh Generator. It is a straight damage absorption shield. It will start to deplete as soon as it's activated and is capable of absorbing up to 500 damage. Once depleted, it will take 60 seconds to regenerate if you have not stuck any certs into it. But for each tier that you buy into Nanite Mesh Generator, the cooldown will be reduced by 5% or 3 seconds. Maxed out, this will bring the cooldown from 60 seconds down to 45 seconds. In the long run, once you have the certs though, there's really no reason to use this shield, and I'll explain why. The Adrenaline Shield, which I like to refer to as the Nanite Mesh Generator's big brother, works very similar to the Nanite Mesh Generator shield. It also absorbs 500 damage. It also starts to deplete once activated. However, certing into it doesn't reduce the regeneration time. It will always stay at 60 seconds. Instead, the Adrenaline Shield regenerates faster by getting kills. The first tier is only going to give you 4.5% of your shield back per kill, but at max rank, that will actually go up to 20%. And if you consider that 20% of your shield regeneration is fairly close to that 15 seconds of regeneration reduction that you would get from using a maxed out Nanite Mesh Generator, then one kill is all you really need to make up the difference between the two. So if you're going on multiple, big kill streaks, the Adrenaline Shield is just going to be so much better than the Nanite Mesh Generator. The one major downside when comparing the Adrenaline Shield to the Nanite Mesh Generator is that the Adrenaline Shield is going to cost a lot of certs. It actually costs 2,250 certs to fully max out, whereas the Nanite Mesh Generator is only going to cost 831. So if you like this type of shield, you have to really make a commitment to the Adrenaline Shield, but in the long run, it's definitely worth it. So that brings me to the third and final shield, which is the Resist Shield. This is my personal favorite of the three, and the one that you're going to see used throughout the video. This shield works quite differently from the other shields, as it's not going to fully absorb incoming damage. Instead, it works more like a cushion, reducing incoming damage by 45%. The upside is that it only takes 17 seconds to fully recharge, and taking damage does not deplete the shield at all. At rank 1, the shield will last 6 seconds, and at max rank, it will actually last 10 seconds, making it so you have very little downtime at all when using this shield, and that's the reason I absolutely love it, and that's the reason why it's my shield of choice for this loadout. Now you will notice a list on your screen, and that's what I guess you could call my rankings for each slot for the loadout that I'm currently talking about, and you will see these pop out or pop up as I go through the video. And at the end of each loadout, I will give, a basic rundown of everything that we talked about. So next we're going to talk about the suit slot. And even though I have my favorites, my recommendations, this slot can be interchanged a lot. And I'm talking even when we're talking about a specific build like a short-ranged infantry killing loadout, there's still a lot of good options here. We'll start with the ammunition belt, which only has 2 tiers. The first tier is going to cost 50 certs and allow you to carry an additional magazine for your primary and your secondary weapon. The second tier is going to cost a whopping 500 certs, and this will allow you to carry 2 additional magazines for each your primary and your secondary weapon. Now, considering that in Planetside 2 there is a plethora of ways to regain ammo, we're just going to avoid this ability. It's just one of my least favorites on almost every single class. Next we have the munitions pouch, which is going to allow you to carry up to 4 more rockets, 1 for each tier that you buy. And this does get quite expensive, costing a total of 1,680 certs to max out. And again, for this loadout, we're just going to completely avoid this. This does have a place, but not really with this loadout. Now, when it comes to the next 4 suit slots, this is where things really start getting interesting, and you can go a lot of different ways here. But we'll start off with the flak armor. For each tier you purchase of the flak armor, you will reduce the amount of damage you take from explosives by 10%, up to a maximum of 50% with the last tier. This is fairly inexpensive for the first 4 ranks. It's only going to cost you 211 certs, but that last rank is going to cost you a whopping 1,000 certs. Now, as good as 50% explosive damage reduction sounds, its downside is that there will be times that you just won't take any explosive damage for extended periods of time, pretty much making flak armor useless in those situations. Next we have the grenade bandolier, which will allow you to carry up to 3 additional grenades at a fairly reasonable price of 750 total certs maxed out. This can be one of the funnest suit slots in the game, but it does have some major drawbacks. The first being that there aren't always going to be situations where having extra grenades, or even 1 grenade for that matter, is going to help you out. And you can probably see a pattern forming that I generally tend to lean towards abilities that are going to help you in a wider variety of situations. And grenades don't exactly fall into that category. The other major drawback is that if you actually do make a conscious effort to use all of the grenades at your disposal, you will eat through resources incredibly fast. So because of that, this is more of a situational tool to equip when needed, and again, I'll bring this up later on when I do the more specific loadouts. That brings us to Nanoweave armor. When equipped, Nanoweave adds a resistance to small arms fire, starting at 7.5% for the first tier and reaching 20% when maxed out. Again, this is only a resistance to small arms fire, and if you take any shots in the dome, Nanoweave will have no effect. It will not stop anything for headshots. Many people are down on Nanoweave since it's nerfed, but it's still one of the best options there is when engaging in infantry combat. Many gunfights are won or lost with a difference of 1 or 2 bullets, and that's where Nanoweave will save your ass. So overall, Nanoweave is still one of the best options out there, but that brings us to the last suit slot, which is Advanced Shield Capacitor. This is going to reduce the recharge delay of your shield by 0.8 seconds for the first tier and 4 seconds when maxed out, bringing your shield recharge delay down to 6 seconds from 10. Also, one thing that many people don't think about with this is if you get caught off guard waiting for your shield to recharge, say you're using Advanced Shield Capacitor, you get caught off guard while it's half recharged, that shield is as good as health, and you wouldn't have that if you didn't have this suit slot equipped. So that's another reason why I love Advanced Shield Capacitor. Overall, it fits really well with this type of short to medium loadout, and that's why it's my #1 recommendation. Now keep in mind, it does have drawbacks. It's not going to directly prevent you from taking any type of damage. So if you find yourself losing a lot of 1v1 type fights where maybe you're leaving the other guy at a small percentage of health, then maybe Nanoweave is the better choice for you, or one of the other options out there. And again, I don't base any of these rankings on cert cost, but it does help that the Advanced Shield Capacitor only costs 341 certs to completely max out, making it the cheapest of all the abilities. That brings us to the grenade slot. Without going into too much detail, all grenade types are viable for this loadout. The standard frag grenade is decent at what it does, and when thrown into a crowded room, at the very least, you're going to make some people scatter. The AV grenade, which is going to cost 100 certification points, is also great. Don't let the name fool you. It's not all that great against vehicles. It will damage them, but they bounce around a lot. But they are very solid against infantry and also very good at taking out max units. However, if you do decide to go with a specialty grenade, I would pick Concussion. It's probably my favorite grenade in the entire game. They do cost 200 certs and are incredibly effective. Hitting somebody with a concussion essentially renders them useless for a short period of time, only allowing them to move their character very slowly and not really allowing them to aim their weapon at all. Landing a concussion grenade into a large group of enemies and just mowing them down afterwards while they're paralyzed and just staring at you is one of the most gratifying feelings that you can get in this game. Just be aware, however, that they have no bounce, and the way grenades are in this game, they're a little bit wonky when you throw them, so it's not too hard to hit a ledge right in front of you, and it's fairly easy to concuss yourself and or your teammates. So just be aware of that if you do go with concussion grenades. So the last choice you have to make before moving on to the weaponry is the utility slot, and the heavy assault has three options: C4 or the universal medical and restoration packs. C4 is amazing against both vehicles and infantry units, especially maxes, but since we're mainly focused on taking out infantry and our rockets already give us a means to dispose of a max, I would go with the med kits. I, like most people, prefer them over restoration kits simply because it's instant. Restoration does heal over time and does have some uses, but it's only better than med kits in a very limited amount of situations. Either way, both are going to allow you to extend those kill streaks a lot longer without having to find a medic. So for a quick recap of our loadout for our short to medium infantry focused heavy assault, we're going to go with the ability slot, we're going to go with the resist shield, adrenaline shield coming in second. For the suit slot, we're going to go advanced shield capacitor with nano weave coming in at a close second. For the grenade slot, we're going to go with concussion grenades, although anti-vehicle grenades and frag grenades are good choices as well. And for the utility slot, we want to go with med packs. So before I start my weapon recommendations, I want you guys to know that I don't have hundreds and hundreds of kills with every LMG in the game, but I have been killed with them quite a bit. I know of them from word of mouth. I do own every single LMG in the game. I have used every single LMG, and I know the stats for every single LMG. So I did use them enough where I felt that I was comfortable enough to actually make a recommendation for you guys. Also, keep in mind that a lot of these guns might cross over. I might use the same weapon for a short to medium loadout as I would for a medium to long range loadout. A good example of this would be something like the EM6, which is a favorite amongst NC heavy assaults. It's very good at medium range. It doesn't really suffer too much unless maybe you're point blank, and it doesn't really suffer too much once you start getting out to longer ranges either. So that gun could very well be on both of my lists. And I am not going to be using shotguns for this list just because they are just for that really specific close quarters type of gameplay, so it doesn't even really cover my short to medium loadout. So I'm not going to be using shotguns. This is pretty much going to be limited to LMGs and possibly battle rifles. So starting off with the TR, my favorite LMG for this loadout, and possibly my favorite TR LMG, is the T32 Bull. It's just a great all-around short to medium range weapon, and if you need to, you can still get some pretty decent long-range kills because it is quite controllable. It does have a smaller magazine, but it makes up for it with a fast reload speed. It has really nice hip fire. It's just an all-around really good weapon. Next on my list is the MSWR. This thing in the right hands is an absolute monster. It's got 750 rounds per minute for a rate of fire. It does good damage at 143. Does again have a small magazine size, but again also has that faster reload speed. It also has really good hip accuracy, which is nice for close quarters, but it is a little bit harder to control. It does have some more unpredictable recoil to it, and that's the reason I have it ranked a little bit lower than the Bull. They're both phenomenal weapons. It's just if you're a new player or if you have problems, controlling recoil, I do think the Bull is a little bit better. So last on my list for the TR is the T9 Carve. This also has an insanely high rate of fire at 750 rounds per minute with 143 damage. It's going to have the same time to kill as the MSWR. It's actually got a bigger magazine than the MSWR. It's slightly more controllable, so you're probably wondering why I actually have this ranked a little bit lower. Well, it does have that slightly bigger, or that bigger magazine. It does have a longer reload time, so those kind of cancel each other out a little bit. But the reason I have the MSWR ranked just a little bit higher is because it's got a lot better hip accuracy. And typically you don't want to fire from the hip with any LMG, but with the MSWR the option is there, and you will find yourself in situations where hip fire is just going to be ideal. So that's the reason I have it ranked just a little bit higher. I actually went back and forth on which one I wanted there. The good thing about the T9 Carve is that it's free. It comes with your heavy assault. You don't actually have to spend any money or any certs buying it. So moving on to the VS, I must say I fell in love with a couple of VS LMGs. I do have my favorites though, and starting off we have the Orion VS54. This might be my favorite LMG in the entire game. And yes, it's free. It comes with your heavy assault as a VS. It has an insane rate of fire at 750 rounds per minute. It does 143 damage, so you know you're going to be putting out the lead, having a really good time to kill on this gun. It only has a 50 round magazine, but it has a good reload speed. It also has incredible hip fire and is fairly controllable to kind of round things out. Next on my list we have the Pulsar LSW, and this is only going to do 698 rounds per minute, which is still pretty damn good. 143 damage. Now this has 75 rounds in the magazine, which is quite good considering this actually has a really fast short reload as well, just over 3 seconds, which you don't really usually get those two in a package together. The only downside to the Pulsar is that it does have pretty horrible hip fire, but again, you don't want to really be firing these from the hip unless you have to. So rounding out my list for the VS, we have the SVA-88. Again, it has a solid rate of fire at 698 rounds per minute, has a good magazine size at 75, which is more than enough to let you make use of that really good short reload. And overall, it's just a really solid gun. The only place it really falters is the hip fire, which again is not that important for LMGs. But overall, just a really solid gun, and that rounds out my list for the VS LMGs. So last but not least, we have the new Conglomerate, and their LMGs are going to be a little bit different from the other two factions because we only have 143 damage gun in the whole bunch. These are kind of the heavy hitters. And to start off, we're going to have a 1A and a 1B. That's going to be the Anchor and the GD22S. You can really flop these around. They are very similar in the way that they act and the way that you're going to use them. They both have good hip fire. They both have smaller mags with faster reloads. They're just all around a good medium to short range LMG. Function almost more like a hard-hitting assault rifle at 167 damage. So the rate of fire is not going to be there compared to the other faction LMGs, but they are going to put out that 167 damage, giving them a pretty good time to kill, and I love both of these guns. Next, I'm actually going to go with the EM6, and a lot of you might consider this more of a medium or medium to long range weapon, but it is still pretty good when you get into close quarters. It's got that 167 damage at still a decent rate of fire at 600, so the time to kill is definitely going to be there. It's got that 100 round magazine, so if you need to just hit fire and spray, you can. Overall, the EM6 is just one of my favorite LMGs in the game, and I think if you were to poll NC heavy assaults, a lot of them would actually agree with me. But to round out my list for NC, since we already used 3 NC LMGs, I'm actually going to cheat a little bit and dip into the NS pool. And yes, I'm talking about the NS15M. This gun does not have the best time to kill in the world. It's only going to do 143 damage at a modest 625 rounds per minute. However, it is good in almost every other category. It does have a smaller magazine at 55, but it's got an insanely fast reload speed, the fastest of any other LMGs. And the smaller magazine magazine doesn't even really come into play because of that. It also has really, really good hip fire for an LMG and is overall just very, very accurate. So I actually really like this gun. I plan on using this more often in the future. It's actually just a really fun gun to play around with. And one thing I really like about it, and this has nothing to do with anything, is it looks more like a realistic looking gun, and it's got that more realistic sound to it, and I just kind of like that out of it. So that rounds out my list for the new conglomerate. And I'm not even going to begin to get into weapon attachments for all these guns. It would just take way too long to cover this. But a rule of thumb, and I guess I'll just let you guys know that on all the guns that I have mentioned in this video, every single one I have a 1x optic or 1x scope, whatever you want to call it, and I have a foregrip on. Most of them I don't have anything else attached. A lot of them have different options like soft point or maybe high velocity ammo. Again, I'm just not going to get into the details of that because it would take entirely too long. But if you want to go with something like that, just play around with it and see if you like it. As far as sidearms go for this loadout, again, it's just too much personal preference where I'm not going to actually get into this. If you want something like a heavy hitter, that's perfectly fine. If you want something spammable like the beamer or maybe the mag shot, that stuff's fine as well. It's all up to you. One thing that you could possibly go with, since this is heavy assault, depending on what gun you're using, depending on how comfortable you are not having a sidearm, you could actually go with the new crossbow and the Recon Detect bolts. Now, I have not tried these out very much, but it is a possibility. I know a lot of people are raving about these, and if you feel comfortable going without a sidearm, and I say this more for heavy assault because you have such large magazines in most of these guns, even the smaller ones are going to be at 50 rounds, then that might be a very solid option, but that's just up to you. So to finish up our short to medium range infantry killing heavy assault loadout, we need to pick a launcher, and we're really going to only focus on a couple here. We're going to focus mainly on the dumbfires. I will talk about the rest of the launchers later on in part 2 of the video, and the reason we're going to focus on the dumbfires is because they are going to hit the hardest. They're going to do the most damage, and the main thing we want to do with our launchers is take out maxes, and no launchers can actually lock on the maxes, so these are perfect for that. Now, the starting launchers are perfectly fine. You have the ML7 for the TR, the Shrike for the NC, and the S1 for the VS. If you want, you can spend some money and go with the NS Decimator. It is going to do more damage, however, it does come with one less rocket and a slower projectile speed. So you just have to weigh the pros and cons and decide what actually works better for you. So that pretty much covers our first basic loadout. I know this was extremely long, and a lot of it was very, very basic. This was geared more to newer players. In part 2, I will cover the other loadouts, the medium to long range loadout and the specialized loadouts in a much quicker fashion. I won't have to go into as many details with the certification points and stuff like that. I'm pretty much just going to list the loadout and you guys can check it out from there. I'll also be doing my weapon recommendations for those loadouts. I will cover the launchers more in depth, and I will talk about the Empire specific heavy weapons a little bit as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Even you veteran players can at least kind of rag on me about my weapon recommendations a little bit. Tell me how you feel. But anyways, guys, that is all I have. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in part 2.
One, four.